Imagine this. You wake in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, heart racing, gasping for air. The remnants of a nightmare cling to your mind like cobwebs, elusive yet suffocating. You can barely recall the specifics. A monstrous figure chasing you, a door you couldn't open, a voice you couldn't understand. But the feeling, the weight of it, is so real, so alive, it lingers in the pit of your stomach. You try to shake it off. You remind yourself it's just a dream, a figment of your mind's wild imagination. But then, as you lie there, staring at the ceiling, you wonder, why does it feel so much more than that? What if, just for a moment, you stopped dismissing your nightmares as meaningless fragments of your unconscious? What if they weren't just bad dreams, but windows into something much deeper, something you've been avoiding? Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, believed that every dream, every nightmare, holds a key. A key to unlock parts of ourselves that we don't want to face. But here's the paradox. The nightmares we fear the most might be the ones that are trying to save us. The darker they are, the greater their potential to reveal something profound about who we really are, about what we've repressed and what we need to confront. So why do we run from them? Why are we so quick to label them as just dreams or unimportant? Is it because we fear what we might find if we dared to look deeper? Or is it because we've been taught to ignore the unconscious mind, to dismiss its power, its lessons, its wisdom? We've been conditioned to believe that nightmares are just a disturbance to our peace, something to be shaken off as quickly as possible. But what if they're more like a warning bell? What if they are, in fact, screaming at us to wake up to something we've been blind to? The question that Jung urges us to ask is, what if our nightmares are the voices of the soul, calling us to look inside and finally face the darkness we've been running from? The feeling, the unease that follows a particularly vivid nightmare. That uneasiness isn't just a fear of the monsters or the chaos within the dream. It's the fear of something that goes deeper. It's the fear of yourself. What would happen if you turned toward those shadows instead of running away? What if the most terrifying part of the nightmare isn't the demons or the monsters, but the truths they reveal about who you really are? The truth is this: nightmares aren't accidents. They are born from the depths of your psyche. They come from the parts of you that you don't acknowledge, that you hide, and that you refuse to face. Every monster, every chase, every terrifying scenario is a reflection of something hidden within you, something that needs to be seen, felt, and understood. Now, the great question: what if, instead of avoiding your nightmares, you embraced them? What if you understood them as keys to your emotional, psychological, and spiritual growth? You might be thinking, but what if they're just random? What if there's nothing deep or meaningful in them? Jung would argue that the unconscious mind doesn't work in randomness. There's always purpose behind every symbol, every feeling. Your nightmares are not meaningless. They are trying to tell you something. But what exactly? Perhaps the journey to understanding your nightmares is the journey toward understanding yourself. Maybe the darkness in your dreams isn't as scary as we make it out to be. Just maybe, your nightmares hold the very keys to your transformation, your healing, your freedom. But how do we begin? How do we unlock the hidden meaning in these dreams, and what does it take to face them head on? To do this, we must first understand the psychological and philosophical roots of why we have nightmares, and what they are trying to teach us about who we are. As we dive into the heart of Jungian Dream Theory, we'll explore why facing the monsters within might be the only way to finally free yourself from the chains of your unconscious. It's time to understand the hidden meanings that lie beneath the surface of your nightmares, and to ask yourself, what are they really trying to show you? To understand the true significance of your nightmares, you first need to understand the nature of the mind itself, the way it works, the way it processes emotions, memories, and traumas. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious mind is not just a passive repository for random thoughts and forgotten memories. It is an active, living part of our psyche, constantly working, constantly speaking to us, even when we are unaware of it. Jung's concept of the shadow is the key to understanding the hidden meanings behind your nightmares. The shadow is the part of your unconscious mind that holds everything you've repressed or rejected. Your fears, your desires, your guilt, your anger, your shame. These are the aspects of yourself that society, family, or your own conscious mind deem unacceptable or too dangerous to acknowledge. As a result, you push them into the darkness, into the shadow, hoping they will disappear. But here's the paradox. The more you repress these parts of yourself, the more they control you. They don't vanish. They just become unconscious forces that silently shape your behavior, your relationships, your perceptions of reality. Jung argued that until you bring these parts into consciousness, until you confront them directly, you will continue to be manipulated by them without realizing it. Now let's consider your nightmares. They are not just random chaos or products of stress. They are windows into your shadow, calling attention to the parts of you that you refuse to see. Each terrifying image, each monster, each distorted scenario is an aspect of yourself that you are too afraid to face. Whether it's an ancient fear of abandonment, a repressed desire for control, or unresolved guilt, your nightmares are bringing these hidden truths to the surface in the form of vivid, symbolic imagery. This brings us to an uncomfortable realization. You can't truly understand yourself until you face the parts you've been avoiding. Jungian Dream Theory suggests that dreams are the language of the unconscious, and the darker, more unsettling dreams are the most important. They are not just the mind's way of releasing tension or processing daily experiences. They are calls to action. They are invitations to look inward and confront the shadow self that you've tried to ignore. Jung argued that unless we face our unconscious material, it will dominate our lives, often in ways we don't even understand. This is where things get even more interesting and even more unsettling. Jung believed that the unconscious mind isn't just trying to make us aware of our personal shadows. It's also trying to show us the universal forces at play within all of us. In other words, your nightmares are not just about you. They are about humanity. They speak to the primal, collective experiences we all share, no matter our culture, background, or life story. Jung's concept of the collective unconscious posits that there are universal symbols and archetypes that exist within the human psyche, symbols that transcend individual experiences and tap into a shared, inherited knowledge. These symbols appear in our dreams, including our nightmares, and carry with them messages about our deepest fears and desires. Think about it. Many people have the same nightmares or similar symbolic themes, being chased, falling, or encountering monstrous creatures. These archetypal experiences are the reflections of our shared unconscious fears, not just personal anxieties. The monstrous figures in your nightmares could symbolize the unconscious forces, fear, rage, self-loathing, that you have been taught to suppress. Or perhaps they are representations of archetypal energies, like the shadow, the anima animus, or the self, trying to reveal their presence in your psyche. Jung emphasized that the unconscious doesn't speak directly. It speaks through symbols that often emerge in dreams and nightmares. These symbols are not arbitrary. They are laden with meaning, often so deep and complex that it can take years of reflection and introspection to fully understand them. But why do we resist this? Why do we dismiss the hidden messages in our nightmares and run away from them? The resistance lies in fear. Fear of what we might discover about ourselves, fear of what we might have to change in order to confront these dark aspects of our psyche. It is easier, safer to ignore them, to push them back into the unconscious. But Jung warned, this is where the real danger lies. The more we avoid our shadow, the more it controls our lives from the depths of the unconscious, influencing our thoughts, behaviors, and even our physical health. So, what does this mean for us? How do we start confronting our nightmares and the shadow they represent? To answer that, we need to understand the psychological roots of why we fear facing our unconscious material. We need to understand the defense mechanisms that the mind uses to keep us from confronting the darker parts of ourselves. These defenses, such as repression, denial, and projection, are survival mechanisms designed to protect us from psychological harm. But in the long run, they cause more harm than good. They block us from self-awareness and emotional integration. Jung believed that the only way to achieve psychological wholeness, to heal from the wounds that plague us, is to bring the unconscious into conscious awareness. This is the foundation of individuation, the process by which we integrate all parts of ourselves, both light and dark. Only by embracing the shadow, by bringing these hidden parts into the light, can we become whole. And yet, this process of individuation isn't easy. It requires the courage to face the parts of ourselves that we've kept hidden for so long. It requires us to confront our deepest fears, our darkest desires, and our most painful memories. It requires us to embody the full spectrum of the human experience, not just the comfortable, socially acceptable parts. Imagine this. You've spent years avoiding your nightmares, pushing them away every time they surface. You've convinced yourself that they are just random, meaningless fragments of your mind. But what if they weren't random? What if, by avoiding them, you've allowed them to silently shape your life, your relationships, and your sense of self in ways you're not even aware of? Your nightmares aren't just dreams. They are unconscious forces that influence you in the background of your waking life. They affect how you feel about yourself, how you interact with others, and how you perceive the world. The truth is, the longer you deny the messages in your nightmares, the more these hidden forces begin to control your life in subtle, often destructive ways. Jung believed that the unconscious mind is not separate from the conscious mind, but is deeply woven into every aspect of our daily existence. The unconscious doesn't just stop functioning when we wake up. It continues to influence our thoughts, behaviors, and perceptions. And the more we repress or avoid the shadow, the more we allow it to direct our actions in unconscious ways. Take, for example, the psychological phenomenon known as projection. Projection occurs when we unconsciously attribute parts of ourselves, our fears, desires, or unresolved emotions, onto others. We may dislike a certain trait in someone else, such as arrogance, and become enraged by it, even though this trait may be something we deny or repress in ourselves. Our nightmares can be the catalyst for these projections. They show us the parts of ourselves we've rejected, and when we fail to acknowledge them, we project them outward onto others. Have you ever met someone who, despite being a kind and well-meaning person, seems to have an almost irrational dislike of others, or finds themselves in toxic relationships over and over again? What if, beneath the surface, that person is projecting their own unresolved shadow, their fears of rejection, their self-loathing, their unacknowledged desires onto others? The projections aren't their enemies, but their own hidden parts, trying to get their attention. The more we fail to face our unconscious material, the more it leaks into our everyday interactions. We become prisoners of our own shadows, unconsciously repeating patterns and behaviors that hinder our growth. These hidden forces create internal conflict, making us act in ways that contradict our conscious values. It's like living with a silent saboteur who directs your life from the shadows, and the longer you ignore them, the more destructive they become. But the consequences of repressing your shadow don't just stay confined to the personal realm. They ripple outward, affecting the broader society. Jung understood that individual transformation leads to collective transformation. If each person's unconscious remains hidden and unexplored, society as a whole is left with a collective shadow. This is why we see so much dysfunction, division, and conflict in the world today. When large groups of people, or even entire cultures, suppress their shadow, they project it onto others, creating scapegoats, enemies, and outsiders. Nations, religions, and social movements often create an us versus them mentality, believing that their shadow lies in the opposite camp. But in reality, both sides of the argument are projecting their unconscious material onto one another, unable to see the truth in their own hearts. This collective shadow is what fuels wars, prejudice, discrimination, and political polarization. It is what keeps us divided, as we continue to point fingers outward instead of looking inward. True peace, both on a personal and societal level, cannot exist until we face our own shadows. Only by owning our darkness can we heal the wounds that divide us. So what happens when we continue to run from our nightmares? When we refuse to face the darkness within? We continue to live in a state of ignorance, unaware of the forces driving our behaviors, relationships, and perceptions. Our minds become fragmented, torn between the conscious and the unconscious, unable to integrate the parts of ourselves that we reject. This fragmentation leads to inner turmoil, anxiety, depression, confusion, and ultimately an incomplete life. Moreover, this disconnection between the conscious and unconscious mind prevents us from realizing our full potential. When we avoid the shadow, we avoid the parts of ourselves that are capable of immense creativity, power, and wisdom. The shadow is not only the repository of our fears and weaknesses, it is also the source of our untapped strength. It holds the key to our true selves, the selves that can rise above limitations and break free from the chains of the past. This brings us to a crucial point. The longer you ignore your nightmares, the longer you stay imprisoned by your own unconscious forces. Every time you push them aside, every time you convince yourself that they don't matter, you surrender your power to your unconscious mind. The only way to regain control is to face them head on, to bring your shadow into the light of your consciousness, and to integrate its wisdom into your waking life. Jung's idea of individuation, the process of becoming whole, depends on this integration. To become whole, you must embrace all parts of yourself, not just the ones that are easy or comfortable. This means facing the dark, uncomfortable parts of your psyche and accepting them as part of your humanity. It means accepting your fears, your flaws, your anger, and your sadness, not as weaknesses, but as essential aspects of your growth and evolution. The most profound consequence of not facing your nightmares is not just the emotional and psychological suffering you endure in silence, it is the loss of your true potential. You cannot live fully if you refuse to confront the parts of yourself that make you uncomfortable. Your shadow is trying to teach you, to guide you toward your fullest expression. By running from it, you deny yourself the power and wisdom that are already within you. So the question remains, how long will you let the shadow control you from the darkness? Now that we understand the hidden forces at play, the consequences of ignoring them, and the way our nightmares reflect the deepest, most repressed parts of ourselves, it's time to ask, how do we break free? The rebellion against the unconscious forces within is not a simple act of willpower or rational understanding. It is a radical, transformative shift in how we relate to ourselves and the world around us. It requires us to move beyond our comfort zones, to step into the darkness we've been avoiding, and to embrace it, not as something to fear, but as something essential to our evolution. Breaking free from the grip of the shadow starts with a fundamental shift in perspective. We must begin to view our nightmares not as enemies or disturbances, but as messengers. They are symbols of our unconscious material, offering us insight into the very forces that shape our behavior, our choices, and our lives. The key to liberation is no longer to run from them, but to understand them. Jung's approach to dream interpretation emphasizes the importance of acceptance. This is not about fixing your nightmares or trying to control them, but about learning to accept the parts of yourself that these dreams represent. The act of facing your shadow is not an act of annihilation, but of integration. You must bring these hidden parts of yourself into the light and acknowledge them for what they are. Fragments of your own psyche that have been cast into the darkness due to fear, shame, or denial. But how do we do this? The first step is self-awareness. Without awareness, we cannot begin to change. And the best way to start this process is through dream journaling. By recording your dreams, especially your nightmares, you begin to build a bridge between your conscious and unconscious minds. You start to notice patterns, symbols, and recurring themes that can offer valuable insights into your unconscious fears and desires. As you write down your dreams, ask yourself, what part of me does this symbol represent? Why does this figure feel so threatening? What is it trying to communicate? But don't expect immediate answers. The process of integration takes time. You must learn to sit with the discomfort, to dwell in the uncertainty and mystery of your own psyche. Jung believed that the unconscious speaks in symbols, often in cryptic, metaphorical language that doesn't reveal its truth immediately. The shadows in your dreams are not enemies to defeat, but parts of you to understand. This is where things get interesting. Facing your shadow requires bravery, and not just the bravery to confront external challenges, but the bravery to confront your inner world. It's about honoring the parts of yourself that you have hidden for years. This includes your anger, your desire, your fear, and your guilt, all the things that you've been taught to suppress, dismiss, or deny. By giving them space to exist, you break the cycle of repression. The second step in breaking free is shadow integration. This means allowing the parts of you that have been cast into the dark to emerge and be acknowledged. It's about welcoming the repressed emotions and unacceptable desires into your conscious awareness. You can begin by practicing radical self-compassion, accepting yourself in your entirety, including the aspects of yourself that you might feel ashamed of. This process is like alchemy, turning lead into gold. By confronting the darkness, you are transforming it into a powerful force for personal growth. But shadow integration is not about accepting your flaws and saying, that's just who I am. It's about seeing the potential in these dark parts of yourself. For example, your anger, if properly understood and channeled, can be a source of strength and empowerment. Your fear can be a guide, pointing out areas of your life where growth and change are needed. Your desire can fuel your passion and creativity, driving you to create and innovate. Once you begin to embrace your shadow, you'll notice something remarkable. Your nightmares lose their power. They no longer hold the same terrifying grip on you. Instead of running from them, you begin to understand them, and in doing so, you begin to reclaim the energy and wisdom they have to offer. The darkness that once terrified you becomes a source of strength, clarity, and freedom. At this point, the real magic happens when you stop projecting your unconscious material onto others, when you stop denying the parts of yourself that you once feared. You step into a new realm of self-mastery. You are no longer controlled by your unconscious desires or emotions. Instead, you are able to live consciously, making choices from a place of awareness and understanding. And here's the ultimate paradox. The more you embrace your darkness, the more you become whole. Wholeness is not the absence of flaws or imperfections. It is the integration of all parts of yourself, light and dark. It is the union of your conscious mind with your unconscious, of your waking life with your dreams. This is the essence of Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming your true, authentic self. But this process of integration requires courage and commitment. It's not an easy path. You will have to face your fears, confront your wounds, and embrace your contradictions. You will be tempted to retreat, to avoid, to revert back to old patterns. But the longer you stay on this path, the more liberated you will become. And as you continue to walk this path, something incredible happens. You start to notice a shift in the way you experience the world. You begin to see others as reflections of your own shadow, not as enemies to fight or control, but as mirrors to your own psyche. You become more empathetic, more compassionate, and more accepting of others because you have learned to accept yourself. This is the true rebellion. It is the rebellion against the tyranny of the unconscious mind, against the lies and fears that keep you trapped in a cycle of self-sabotage and repression. It is the rebellion against a society that encourages you to hide your darkness, to ignore your nightmares, and to deny the very parts of yourself that make you whole. Breaking free from your shadow is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. It's about owning your truth, stepping into your power, and living authentically, without fear of the darkness within. It's about understanding that the very thing you've been running from is the thing that will set you free. There's a profound truth that lies hidden beneath all the exploration of shadows, fears, and nightmares. One that, when finally realized, shatters the illusion of separation between who you are and who you could be. It is this: you are not broken. The pain you have suffered, the fears you've run from, the parts of you you've tried to suppress, none of it is a curse. It's not evidence of a deficiency or something to be fixed. Your nightmares are not mistakes. They are the mirrors of your wholeness, the reflections of your true self waiting to be seen. And the moment you stop running from them, you step into the power you've been denying for so long. This is the ultimate realization in Carl Jung's psychology. To become whole, you must embrace both your light and your shadow. You are not defined by your flaws, your guilt, your anger, or your fear. You are defined by your ability to integrate them. Wholeness is not perfection. It is acceptance. It is not the denial of your darkness, but the recognition that it is a part of you, with wisdom and energy to offer. Jung called this process individuation, the path to becoming the fullest version of yourself. It's not a destination. It's not something you can check off a list. It's a journey of constant self-awareness. A journey in which every step you take toward understanding your nightmares, your darkness, and your shadow is a step toward personal liberation. For most of your life, you have been chasing the idea of perfection. A perfect body, perfect relationships, a perfect career, a perfect self. But perfection is a prison. It is an illusion that traps you in a cycle of performance, masking your true self in favor of a socially accepted version. And when you do that, you inevitably repress the parts of yourself that don't fit, the parts that are too raw, too real, too messy. But wholeness is different. Wholeness is not about erasing your flaws or ignoring your darkness. It is about reclaiming them. It is about accepting that the parts of you that you feared the most, the parts you thought would destroy you if they ever came to the surface, are actually the parts that hold the most power, wisdom, and potential. Think about it. The person who has faced their shadow, the one who has embraced their anger, their jealousy, their guilt, their despair, is no longer controlled by those emotions. They no longer fear them. Instead, they channel them. They use that energy to drive their creativity, to set boundaries, to fuel their passions, and to live authentically. In a sense, the shadow becomes your ally. The more you face it, the more you realize that it is not a source of destruction, but a source of power. You can't live fully without it. Jung also taught us that when we avoid our shadow, we project it onto others. This is where the greatest illusion of all comes into play. We think we are separate. We think our fears, our flaws, and our pain are uniquely ours. But in truth, these are shared human experiences. Every person who avoids their shadow is doing the same thing you are, pushing down parts of themselves, afraid to face the full complexity of who they are. And because they are unwilling to look within, they create division. They create an us versus them mentality. But when you integrate your own shadow, you stop projecting it onto others. You stop seeing people as the enemy and start seeing them as mirrors. The moment you understand this, you understand the profound connection that links all of humanity. Every person you meet, every story you hear, is a reflection of some aspect of your own psyche. You cannot separate yourself from the collective human experience. And when you recognize this interconnectedness, you move from separation to wholeness, from fear to compassion. Now, let's return to your nightmares. They are not just personal. They are part of this collective unconscious, a shared psychic pool that contains the wisdom and experience of all humankind. This is why we see similar themes in nightmares across cultures. The monster chasing you, the falling, the being trapped. These are not your fears alone. They are the fears of the human race. And they are the keys to your transformation. This realization that your nightmares are not just random, but are deeply connected to universal human experiences, liberates you. It removes the sense of isolation and shame that comes from repressing your emotions. No longer are you haunted by these dreams. Instead, you are empowered by them. You now have the power to transform these dark images into sources of strength. You no longer fear what you do not understand. Instead, you embrace it as part of your growth. But the most powerful realization of all is this. By facing your shadow, you are becoming who you were always meant to be. All those years of avoiding the darkness, of pretending it didn't exist, were the very things that kept you from your full potential. Your shadow was never your enemy, it was your teacher. The moment you accept your shadow, you step into a new life. A life that isn't based on perfection, but on authenticity. A life where you can fully feel the joy, the pain, the love, the fear, the anger, and embrace it all. You no longer have to choose between being good or bad. You are simply human, and in that humanity, you find your freedom. As you step into your power, you will feel a shift. The grip of your nightmares loosens. The darkness becomes less terrifying because you now realize it is a part of you that you can master. And the real magic happens when you begin to see others as reflections of your own inner world. You will no longer fear their shadows because you've made peace with your own. In the end, facing your nightmares is not about solving them. It's about understanding them. It's about realizing that the truth behind your fear is not to be feared at all. The truth is empowerment, and the path to freedom lies in embracing all parts of yourself. This is the ultimate realization. You are whole. Not despite your nightmares, but because of them.